Russell Wilson, I can tell you this, isn't happy with Pete Carroll. It's a Pete Carroll thing. The offense is outdated. That's not my opinion. I've had three different Seattle players tell me they feel like they're running a 1980s offense. Since the death of Paul Allen, Pete Carroll has unquestioned power. I don't think this is a great relationship. I don't think Russell Wilson's going to get traded. I've been told he's not going to get traded, but it's fluid.
Welcome to the latest podcast. Rob Staton and Robbie Williams with you here as the Seahawks off-season continues. Never a dull moment with the Seahawks and the latest developments in this Russell Wilson saga, and I am going to call it a saga, is that his good friend Colin Cowherd is back in the Fox Sports studio and was broadcasting his opinions on this situation, but also what I imagine broadcasting some of Russell Wilson's opinions on this issue as well, you know, with quotes like, Russell Wilson, I can tell you this, isn't happy with Pete Carroll, you know, laying some blame at the door of the ownership situation, claiming that Pete Carroll has got too much power, and then saying, doesn't it kind of feel like Seattle is making crap up as they go, which was quite an explosive line that he used there. But I think the interesting thing for me with this, Robbie, is whether you like Colin Cowherd or not, and there are mixed views with Colin, as there is with any broadcaster who is of his style and level of fame and who's very opinionated. However, what you cannot deny is that Colin Cowherd is connected to the Russell Wilson camp through Wilson, possibly through Mark Rodgers as well, but I suspect it's more of a Wilson connection. He's also close to Greg Olsen, who of course now works for Fox Sports. And Greg Olsen has just spent a year with the Seahawks. He quoted that there was at least 3 people he'd spoken to on the Seahawks team who feel that the offense is outdated and needs to get with the times. So I found this a very useful piece of broadcasting, Robbie. It wasn't the kind of thing that any Seahawks fan necessarily wants to hear, because you want things to feel like it's all well and good and everything's rosy. But it at least provided us some real, genuine insight into how Russell Wilson is thinking and what the real issue is here. And as we talked about in last week's podcast, it feels like it is Pete Carroll versus Russell Wilson. That is kind of how it feels right now. I don't think they hate each other. I don't think they can't stand the sight of each other at all. I think this is a philosophical difference. I think this is Russell Wilson feeling a sense of urgency because he's 33 in November and he wants to win now. And I'm not convinced that he believes Pete Carroll running things his way in terms of the way the team plays, either on offense or defense, or the structure of the franchise, with Pete Carroll having so much power and having so much sway in decision-making in terms of personnel, is going to help him achieve what he wants. And when I see this from Colin Cowherd, that was my takeaway. What was yours?
I mean, the first thing I thought of was that, I mean, he's not wrong, right? I mean, the offense is outdated. I mean, we've been complaining about it for, the last 8 weeks of the season. And it's frustrating when you look at how the season progressed, and Russ has a right to be frustrated. I mean, let's be honest, for the first, 6-7 weeks of the season, he was the leading MVP candidate. Like, there was no question. Everyone was saying he was the guy. He was lighting it up. He has one bad game, and then things just get stripped from him. So, and I think this is where Russ's frustration comes into play, with Pete Carroll, that he just didn't let him ride. And it feels like maybe he doesn't feel like Pete trusts him enough. And, there's a lot of interesting things that you can read into. I think I saw someone say, like, Chris Carson unfollowed Russell Wilson and on Instagram or something like that, or Twitter. I don't really know which one. And I just saw somebody, I don't even know if this is true. This is something I read, but like, you start thinking all these things that could be going into play. And, Russ is probably taking a shot. I mean, you have to imagine, he's taking the Aaron Rodgers approach or something like that, where, you just call the organization out and hope for some changes, because I don't think he wants to go into next year running the football, running the same offense. Even if we bring in this new offensive coordinator, my guess is that he probably wants, a little more control, a little more say, and the ability to, let it sling or let Russ cook or whatever it might be. He probably wants that ability. So, when I first heard this Colin Cowherd report and I read it and then listened to it, I just thought, man, here's a guy he's definitely connected to, to Russ and Mark Rodgers and such. And so, that, typically when he talks about the Seahawks and Russell Wilson, you're going to get, pretty much what you're probably that he's hearing from Russ. And the fact that he heard it from three different Seahawks, I mean, kind of just, kind of puts the, the pin in the pin in. I mean, you got to, the reality is that we are running an outdated offense, and it was boring. It was predictable. I mean, there was not much excitement out of that. And so, I imagine one of them was probably DK Metcalf as well. I mean, he complained about it, and then they tried to force him the ball, and it was like the cornerback read it so well that he took it back for a pick six. And, I imagine just like these kind of things are starting to add up. And I think, I'm going to go back to, I really don't think Russ is going to be traded this year. I think unless he demands it, but I just don't think it's a reality. And I don't think he's going to. He might be trying to find a classy way out if Pete Carroll stays, but I think he's trying to push to see what he can get out of it this year. And my guess is if it doesn't fix itself by next offseason, then he demands a trade.
You see, what I think what we've heard, and this is the exact word that has been used by two people now, Coward and Mike Florio, who Florio has got great connections to Mark Rodgers. I mean, Florio at this stage might as well just come out and say, I speak to Mark Rodgers. I mean, when he was talking last week and he was saying, I've texted my source in the Wilson camp, and usually he replies straight back to me, but he hasn't when I asked whether he's asked for a trade yet. And then the next day he got his response and he said that he hadn't requested a trade yet, but the situation was fluid. I mean, at that point, I mean, who's Florio trying to kid here? He might as well just go, I text Mark Rodgers. I don't really understand why there has to be this kind of mystery around who Florio speaks to. We all know who he speaks to. It's Mark Rodgers. And then Colin Coward used exactly the same term, fluid. It's a fluid situation. Now, here's the thing, Robbie. I don't think Russell Wilson is thinking, I'm not going to request a trade. I'm just trying to see what I can get. What I think Russell Wilson is doing is I'm gonna make myself heard publicly, because Jeremy Fowler made this point as well. And this is the thing. I've got another point to make, but I'll come back to it. Jeremy Fowler said that Wilson has expressed these opinions to the Seahawks privately. And it's clear that Wilson thinks he hasn't got the kind of reaction he was hoping for. So now he's ramped it up a notch and he's gone public. The Seahawks might not like that, but Wilson probably thinks this is the only thing I can do to make myself heard. And if they don't react in the right way now, I wouldn't rule out a trade request down the line. Now, will Wilson do it after the draft, after free agency? Maybe. I think it'd be quite hard to force your way out of a team after those things have happened. But by June the 1st, the dead cap hit situation has completely changed. So that's something to bear in mind. The other thing is that if Russell Wilson sits back now, having made these claims, and the Seahawks say, Russell, you're going to have to just get on with it. We're going to do things how Pete wants. We're not going to invest loads in the offensive line. I mean, I read an article, Robbie, from ESPN or 710 ESPN this week, which laid out kind of an off-season, what the Seahawks could do. And it was like, well, at left guard, Phil Haynes is an option. And at center, they could bring back Ethan Posick. And at cornerback, they could, re-sign Quinton Dunbar. And at running back, well, Rashad Penny's on the roster, and they could bring back Carlos Hyde. And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, if that happens, if this is the off-season, right, Russell Wilson's big decision isn't whether or not he hands in a trade request. It's whether he emails it in or whether he delivers a handwritten note, because there is no way that he's going to look at that and go, yep, this is a team that is listening to me and is determined to get back to the Super Bowl and deliver what I need. So this is a big moment, and it's going to be very interesting to see what the Seahawks do. I'm looking at some of these other quotes that Coward has come out with here. This is what he was saying directly. He likes his teammates. He likes Seattle. It's a Pete Carroll thing. The offense is outdated. I've had 3 different Seattle players tell me they feel like they're running a 1980s offense. He goes on to say, what is happening in Seattle is the offense is outdated, but the defense is no good. And that's Pete's speciality. In the last 5 years, Seattle's defense has gone from 5th to 11th to 26th to 22nd. And too often, Russell Wilson feels like a life preserver for a franchise that can't stop anybody. Now, people may well say, well, in the second half of last season, that wasn't the case because Russell was playing very poorly and the defense was playing well. Yep, you could hold those 5 games in isolation against the Washington team and their third string quarterback, or Colt McCoy's Giants, or Sam Darnold's winless Jets, and who else was in that, murderer's row of opponents that they had in the second half of the Niners with CJ Beathard. You could say that, you could say that was a great defensive effort and they carried Russell, but let's just sort of look at the last 5 years of other evidence where Russell has carried this team. And the reason that this team has had winning records every single year since 2012 is because of Russell Wilson. Because before Russell Wilson arrived, they were 7-9 and 7-9. Now, listen, the LOB were as much, if not more, of a part as was Marshawn in those formative years since Wilson was drafted. But since, 2014? Since 2015, 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Russell Wilson is the main reason why the Seahawks have had winning records. And he has often carried this team. And without Russell Wilson, this roster looks like a top 10 pick roster to me, especially with the way that, Carroll and his staff haven't exactly outcoached anybody recently. They're not elevating the way that some of these, like Kyle Shanahan has done with all the injuries he had to ensure they don't pick in the top 10. I don't see Seattle doing that, Robbie. So for me, Wilson is quite right to be voicing that opinion, as I think he was, to Colin Cowherd. One more quote. He says, I don't think this is a great relationship. I don't think Russell Wilson is going to get traded. I've been told he's not going to get traded, but it's fluid, it's imperfect, it's turbulent, it's not great. Now, when you're using words like turbulent and imperfect, that's just not good. It's just not a good environment. And I really, as I said before, I don't think Wilson is giving the Seahawks one more year and then seeing where it goes. I think Wilson is saying to them right now, you need to listen to me and you better act and you better not have an off season like last year. Because I'll come back to that quote that Colin said at the end of his second segment on Russell Wilson this week, Robbie. It feels like they're throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. And last year, their off-season was a shambles, an utter and total shambles. For them to spend $50 million and spend all the picks that they did, and then go into the actual regular season with still big needs on the defensive line, and I mean relying on like Snacks Harrison and a trade right before the trade deadline with Carlos Dunlap in order to address those needs was simply not acceptable. And they were just kind of like making it up as they go along. And it feels a little bit like they've been making it up as it goes along for a couple of years now. You look at the previous year, they had one pass rusher on the team. They traded him before the draft. And then they're scrambling around after the draft to get Ziggy Ansah and signing him when he's clearly not healthy and not in any shape or form, in any fit shape to play in the NFL. And they gave him, what, $8, $9 million, $10 million or whatever it was for that season. And then they go into the season with Ansah not healthy, with Cassius Marsh and Barkevius Mingo and Jacob Martin as their pass rush. And they get lucky with the Jadeveon Clowney trade right before the season begins. Otherwise, that would have been their pass rush. So these issues, it's not 1 year, Robbie. It's on and on and on. And we talked about it all year. Got a lot of grief for it as well, by the way, from a lot of the fan base. And you know what? Russell Wilson probably, if he read what we were writing or what I was writing or listening to what we were saying, probably would have been nodding along in agreement. And I think this is what he's saying, Robbie. He's saying, you aren't doing that again, or we've got an issue.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to touch base on here, Rob. One is like the Colin Cowherd thing. He did actually mention Max Unger, which kind of bothered me just for the simple fact that what did we get back from Max Unger, right? We got Jimmy Graham, who is one of Russell's best friends. So for him to go out and kind of say that, kind of, there was, in my opinion, kind of was like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Maybe Russ didn't want to trade Max or whatever the case might be, but he got back one of, at the time, one of the best tight ends in the game, and we try to convert him into something different. And I think if that would have worked out differently, if we wouldn't have tried to convert him to a blocking tight end and make him fit our scheme or whatever, or fit Pete's scheme, which is probably more realistic, then that probably would have changed, the course of, the dynamic, at least of the offense. And we've been saying it all season, like, what is the big issue? It starts with the top down. The top is Pete. And so now it's starting to come out more and more like Pete is being the problem. And again, I love Pete Carroll, what he's done for the city, what he's done for Seattle. And I'm really happy with it. But I think Russ has a good point on some of this stuff. Like the offense feels blah. I mean, I really don't know how else to say it. And it was really boring and really frustrating and really predictable. And so he has a lot of things to say, but I disagree with one thing. I really don't think that Russ is saying fix it now before the draft or trade. I'm going to ask for a trade, because I think what's going to end up happening, he's not going to have a choice. He's really not, and he can demand a trade if he wants after the draft, but I don't think it's realistic. I don't think after the draft we would actually trade him. I think they would probably write it out. I think, we've seen him do it before. They've handled people like Marshawn and Percy Harvin and all these other players and Richard Sherman, like people who are way more outspoken than Russ. And I think they've handled them, much better. And I think in the scenario is they'll probably end up holding on to Russ and Russ will probably play. I don't think he's gonna sit out. I don't think he's gonna demand a trade and sit out. Like, I just don't think that's not Russell Wilson, in my opinion. I think he'll play, but next year is when I really think, like, if we don't fix it this offseason, it's done. And I think that's what he's saying. I think he's saying, like, you need to fix it this offseason. And if we goes into the season and knowing, like what you just said, we re-signed Carlos Hyde, and we let Phil Haynes take a shot at left guard, and re-sign Ethan Posick at center, and they don't really make any sort of dynamic changes or anything like that. They don't go get his superstars. Then yeah, you're gonna see probably a different side of Russell Wilson, and more of that diva QB kind of Aaron Rodgers-esque, complaining, and I could see that being the case. But I mean, you got to look at the QBs. Even when Aaron Rodgers complained, like he was like, okay, you're going to draft a quarterback in the first round and not give me a wide receiver like I wanted. Okay, well, I'm going to go play pissed off and light it up. Well, maybe Russ has the same attitude. Maybe he comes out and just like, I'm going to do whatever I can to light it up, and then I'm going to demand a trade. I don't know. I mean, for me, I don't see it being realistic that he's demanding a trade this year, especially now that he's starting to leak the information. I don't think that the trade request is coming that quickly. I think it's more next year kind of thing.
I'll just come back to that word fluid. They have not ruled anything out. And that's the thing. Russell Wilson holds all the cards in this situation. He really, really does. And here's the thing. Russell Wilson's a franchise quarterback. He's not a running back. He's not a receiver. He's not an outspoken cornerback. And the minute that he says, I'm done, you're not listening to me and I'm done, it's over. You can't go into a season with your franchise quarterback saying, I've lost faith, I've lost trust, I don't believe in you as a coach, I don't believe in your philosophy, you aren't listening to me. The concept of him then trotting out at training camp in August and July and leading this team off the back of that, and feeling within himself that I don't want to play this way. You haven't got me the cast of characters that I want to win. You've not given me any input in personnel. I don't see that. And also, I don't think I keep coming back to the urgency level of this. Russell's not a young guy anymore in terms of football years. He's 33. Next year, 34. I mean, like, he doesn't want to be sat here in January, February next year, approaching the 34th year of his life, or in his 34th year of his life, thinking, right, now I need to make a trade when I knew I needed to make a trade. I would just say this to anybody who's sort of wondering what's going on here. There is a very good reason why Wilson is speaking out now, right now, because time is of the essence here. And I want to develop this point a little bit, but I will just say that I wouldn't rule anything out at this point. I think when they say it's fluid, I think they mean it's fluid. They need to see something from this team, because if he doesn't get what he wants, he's not going to go quietly into the night and just crack on with the job and be a good old boy. He's not going to do that. I don't know what it looks like, whether it's a holdout, whether it's more.
I think it looks like Aaron Rodgers in the Packers this year. That's what
I think it's more serious than that. I think it's a lot more serious than that. Aaron Rodgers was not happy about drafting a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers was not happy about the lack of investment in receivers and tight ends. Aaron Rodgers plays in an offense that Russell Wilson would kill to play in. And that's the big thing. Russell Wilson ain't playing in a Matt LaFleur offense with a defensive-minded head coach putting up MVP numbers. So Wilson's got all of the personnel concerns that Aaron Rodgers has, but he's also playing Pete Carroll's offense. And that's, and again, to go back to Colin's point of view, it's Pete Carroll's the issue for Russell Wilson. For Aaron Rodgers, it was, you haven't got me the weapons that I want. I'm going to show you with what you've given me that I can still make it work. But then he's playing in an offense that was conducive to him making it work behind, let's not forget, a fantastic elite offensive line, which is something else that Russell Wilson hasn't got. So when Wilson looks at the Rodgers, he sees Rodgers has got the offensive scheme. Rodgers has got the pass protection. Rodgers has got the MVP. What have I got? That's the big difference between the two.
But he did have it, right? He had it for the first 6 weeks of the football. He was lighting it up. So he has the ability. So I think what he's saying is, Pete, let me continue to do what I was doing the first 6 weeks. And if I have a bad game, back off. Let me finish it. Let me keep going. Like, I have the ability to do this. Give me an opportunity to do that. I don't know. Like, he never said, like, Colin Cowherd never said, like, he said he was frustrated with Pete Carroll, but never said he disliked him or wanted out or any of those kind of things. And you're right. The word fluid and all that, like, it's not like, definitely the situation is muddied, right? I mean, it's not a good situation, but I think, I mean, again, it's just speculation, but I don't feel like, just gut reaction to Russell Wilson as a person, you don't think he's going to demand a trade this year. If it continues to go this path, I think he's trying to make it and be known. He likes Seattle. He likes the players that he plays with. You know, he likes the teammates, he likes the fans, he likes everything about it. It's just the problem is Pete. I think what he's trying to say is trying to get that ball out there and to say, Pete, let me keep cooking, even if I have a bad game. I really believe that's what he's saying. And I think if it doesn't happen this year, this is when I really think, I mean, I know what you're saying, right? I mean, 34, you know, going to those 34 by the time the following year will be 35. Like, you're right. But I mean, you know, Rodgers is 8, 39. I mean, Russ has already said he wants to play to 45. I don't know if that's realistic or not, but, like, you know, he has the ambition and desire to prove people wrong to do that. I could see him being like, okay, I'm going to be 34. You know, I could still have the opportunity to play another 9 years. Like, he believes in himself that much. Like, that's kind of the essence of who Russell Wilson is. You know, I
just think it's, again, I'll just come back to that word fluid. They are not ruling anything out. And until that is ruled out, I think everything is on the table as far as I'm concerned. I think that's just the way it is. We'll see what happens. I mean, but this is the point I want to develop and take this on to now, is that I actually think the Seahawks desperately need somebody to save them. I think that the Seahawks need somebody who is going to hold Pete Carroll to account. And if I was a Seahawks fan, and I've kind of seen mixed opinions as I've been looking online and sort of seeing what people's reaction is to the way that Wilson is going about this, and there's a real mix of views. There are some people who are calling him petty. There are some people who are saying he shouldn't be talking to the media this way. You know, a lot of people are defending Pete Carroll, but then there's a lot of people saying, well, good on you, Russ, for saying this. And, you know, there's a real sort of smorgasbord of opinions off the back of what Wilson has done. In my personal opinion, I think Russell Wilson doing this should receive a standing ovation from everybody, because something needed to happen. The Seahawks are just drifting along. They are treading water. They've not had a championship offseason since 2013. They've not done a good enough job in the draft. They've squandered resources. They don't adapt during games. Their offensive schemes are predictable, so much so that you've got opponents reading wide receiver screens as if they're running the damn route in playoff games. And this has to change. This has to change. And it's quite clear that nobody above Pete Carroll is hauling him into a room and going, Pete, what's going on here? You know what? You need to change this, Pete. You need to do something about this. That's just doesn't seem to be happening. And Cowherd alluded to that there's not really any real accountability from ownership to Pete Carroll. He's got unchallenged power, really. And Wilson is probably the only one in the franchise who has got the ability to enforce change. And by speaking out in the way that he has, it's the only shot you've got to have the kind of change that I personally think is required. Now, listen, there may well be a bunch of fans out there, Robbie, who think that the Seahawks are fine. You know, they were 12-4 last year, and you know, they just had an unlucky game against the Rams. And if they bring everybody back and, you know, they just have another jolly good go in 2021, they may well just win the whole thing. I think they're a mile away. I really think they are so far. Obviously, not as far as like the Bengals. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not. They're not the Broncos, the Bengals. They're not. They're not the Jets. I'm not saying that. But the Seahawks are a tier B team. They're not in the top class of NFL teams that are going to go and win a championship. And you can either just drift along and we can keep having these same conversations every year. One playoff win in 4 years, and next year it could be maybe 2 playoff wins in 5, or 1 playoff win in 5, and we can come back and have the same conversation again about needing to improve the trenches and needing to shift resource and not drafted well and haven't got any draft picks again next year because the Jamal Adams. We could do another year of that. We could do, or we could just admit that some things need to change. And the way I see it is exactly how Russell Wilson sees this, Robbie, I think. I haven't spoken to Russell, so I don't know. If you want to come on the podcast, Russ, hop on, man. There's a seat at the table for you.
Numbers for us if you joined us.
Join us, Russ. We'll go easy on you, not like Dan Patrick. So anyway,
can I just make one quick point off what you said, which I find it really interesting. I just thought about this as you were talking about Russ being trying to save the franchise by speaking out. And what is one thing that Pete Carroll said at his end of the year press conference? He even said, "I have no one to keep me accountable." He had previously was it Nick Carroll and then Sherman? What was his name? I can't remember his name, but he like mentioned two people that were coaches that are no longer coaches on the staff, but they used to hold them accountable and question decisions.
It was Tater, and it was Brendan Carroll.
Brendan Carroll, yeah. So I mean, so he's out here saying like he needs that, and maybe Russ is trying to step into that role and be like, okay, well, I'm going to try to hold you accountable.
Yeah, I think it's probably more serious than that. I think that certainly that there needs to be somebody to hold Russell. I don't think Russell is necessarily reacting to that per se. More that I think Russell, if you were to sit him down and have a really serious conversation with him, would probably voice some of the concerns that we've talked about or that I've written about. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to validate my own opinion on this or trying to say that I know everything or whatever. I'm not. I just think that I think Russell looked at that offseason last year and thought, what the hell are they doing? In the same way that, when he saw all the big pass rushers leave the board and then the Seahawks not do anything and then they couldn't get a deal done with Jadeveon Clowney. And remember, Russell Wilson was on that, like, was he like playing on like PlayStation or Xbox, whatever the kids play on these days? I'm a PS2, N64 kind of guy myself, old school. But anyway, he was on one of those internet things. I'm not a computer games person, so you can probably understand. He was on one of those streams, right? And he was saying, "Hey, Clowney, come back to us." And he put the video, and the video ended up on Twitter like it does. So, he was seeing all these things going on, and he's thinking, what are we doing? This is an off-season where he started the ball rolling by saying we need superstars. And all they'd done is swap Clowney for Benson Mayowa and Bruce Irvin and traded for Quinton Dunbar. And then by the time the season was coming around, he was like, we didn't know whether Quinton Dunbar was going to be, taking on the NFL's best receivers or taking on, a jail sentence. So what's Wilson thinking? He's probably thinking this is a crock of, shit, quite frankly. When are they going to do any more than this to get this thing going here? And I think that's it. I think Wilson's just saying, enough, we need to do things differently. We're not building a roster to win. And he looks at the books and he sees, God, Tom Brady had enough weapons for 2 teams, let alone 1. He had like his A roster for weapons and like his B roster for weapons. And they had a couple of guys injured by the end of the season. OJ Howard wasn't there, they had all sorts of guys who were, it was just ridiculous amount of weapons, a great O-line, a pass rush that could rush with 4. There's a thought. And, 2 brilliant linebackers. And you're thinking, yeah, wow, what a roster. And look, the Bucs didn't have a flawless season, Robbie. They weren't the Chiefs in 14-2, winning the division and then going through and all that. They finished second. They lost to the Saints twice. They had an ugly loss to the Rams. They had some really iffy moments during the season, and then they kind of got hot at the right time and all that. But, when you actually look at it, they had all the pieces you need. And I'm afraid when you look at the Seahawks, they don't have all the pieces that you need. And that's it. And so again, without wanting to repeat myself on what we've talked about in the past, Robbie, here's what I think Russell wants, and here's what I completely agree with him. And I hope the Seahawks sit down in a room and go, Russ, we hear you. We're going to do what you want, and we're going to give it a try. Because I'm telling you now, it is better for the Seahawks and for Pete Carroll to give a bit of ground or give a lot of ground and just go, Russell, you win. I'll fall on my sword and we'll do what you want. Because here's the thing. Pete Carroll's 70 this year, and Russell Wilson's currently 32. I'd quite like Russell Wilson to be the quarterback of the Seahawks for a long time yet. If he's going to play for another 10 years, let's see if it's in Seattle. Pete Carroll ain't going to be here for 10 years. So if you force him out now, and then what are you doing? Potentially, you're just ensuring that Pete finishes his career in a losing fashion, and then the next group that come in are left with a bit of a turd sandwich, quite frankly, Robbie, and trying to rebuild a complete roster. It's better just to transition. And imagine that. Imagine being able to say to a new head coach, come and work with Russell Wilson, as opposed to come and do what every team tries to do, which is come and find a franchise quarterback. So to get back to the original, what I was going to say, you've got a $35 million quarterback, Robbie. My plan A is O-line. That's where your resource needs to be. Protect him, make sure that you've got a top 10 O-line, if not top 5. Make sure that he can't complain about that next year. Go out of your way to get him at least one more weapon, preferably 2. Could be a slot receiver, could be a tight end, could be both. Get him. Just get him. If there's a Leonard Fournette knocking around like last year with the Bucs, go and get him. Doesn't matter that you've drafted one and you've got Ronald Jones. Go and get Fournette as well. Just surround Wilson with weapons. Give him too many weapons, right? Just get it. We'll have him. The Oprah meme. You get a receiver. You get a receiver. You just now give them all to Russell Wilson, right? And then just make sure that he has no complaints. And in order to do that, you're going to have to make some difficult decisions. And that is going to mean whether it's Carlos Dunlap, whether it's Bobby Wagner, whether it's Jamal Adams, whether it's all 3, whether it's 2 out of 3, whatever. You are going to have to make some difficult choices there. And what you're just going to have to do is you're going to have to say, okay, we're going to go young, we're going to go fast, we're going to go angry on defense. We're not going to have big names. But then, so what? I mean, like they had big names last year. And with the greatest respect, that defense, it was okay-ish at the end of the season, but it was really crap at the start of the year. And I'm just not sure that, next year, that defense didn't look tough, physical, angry, scary at all to me, Robbie. I mean, like if I was like a team in the playoffs thinking, right, we're going to play the Seahawks defense this week, I'm not having a sleepless night about that. Yeah, they'll make a few plays. Jamal will chase someone down, he'll blitz and get a sack, and Bobby might make a tackle or two, and Carlos Dunlap will get a few pressures, but we'll deal with that. That's just the NFL. There was nothing about that unit that made me think, oh, it must preserve it at all costs and build around that. That's the strength of the team. Not at all. The strength of the team is Russell Wilson, and you build around him. And it's time for the Seahawks to just look. Pete needs to go up to a mirror, get him real close like I am right now. And he needs to go, Pete, he doesn't have to talk to himself, but he has to go, you've got to let this one go, man. You've had a good run of doing it your way. On the offense, it's now Russell's way and Shane Waldron's way. And it's John Schneider's way. And you say to John, John, get me the best O-line in the league or the NFC and give Russell his weapons and make sure Russell feels as cherished and as protected and as explosive as he possibly can be. Because then you can have no complaints and you're going to go for it and you're going to play tempo and you're going to be aggressive. And do you know what, Robbie? If it fails next year, you can always go back to the way you want to do things. You can. Then you've got the leverage over Wilson to say, well, come on, Russ, we tried all that, man, and you didn't do anything with it. But if it works.
I mean, I agree with you, but I mean, the reality of Pete Carroll actually making that kind of decision is a hard thing to fathom right now.
Then he should go.
I mean, I agree. I 100% agree with you. But the thing is he just signed a 5-year deal. They talked about ownership being a thing. Jody Allen isn't going to fire him. John just signed a new deal. They ain't going to fire him. I mean, what's the next thing to give? I mean, this is why I think it's going to be this year is going to be telling. I think it's really going to, if Russ doesn't see some big changes, I think next year he's going to be like, okay, Like, send me somewhere that where I feel like I'm wanted and deserved, and where I have at least a little bit of a say. I just don't see it being in this year. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, you could bring up the $39 million cap hit or whatever, and I know there's plenty of ways around that. But you're right. I mean, I agree. Go get some offensive line, man. Who doesn't want to see an offensive line that just dominates? I missed that like 2005 season where we had Hutch and all those guys just dominating. Walter Jones and Robbie Kovac and all these guys are just you couldn't. Hasselbeck had all the time in the world back there. So you get Russ an offensive line like that, that'd be awesome. But you're right. There's going to be some things that are going to have to go. And there's going to be where some of the hard decisions are going to be made. Like, you really have to look. I mean, I know Bobby's loved by everybody. You really have to look at it. Like, is he a $20 million middle linebacker worth it? Like, you know what you can get for that? Like, there's a lot of players that you can get. You can get at least 3 good players for that 20 million, I think. Like, at least, maybe 4. And you got to really look at it. And with the salary cap going down, there's a lot of things that you're going to have to make tough decisions on. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why they didn't sign Jamal Adams to an extension right away. And I've read this a couple of times, is that they wanted to have the ability to trade him after. So, they knew they had him for this year. They gave up too much for him. This is the ability now they have the opportunity to trade him because they haven't signed him to a deal. But that means some other team is going to have to. So they have to take that in consideration. That's why I think is ultimately, we might get a first for him, but I think it's probably more realistic, like a second and a third, just because I don't think someone's going to give up a first for him anymore, but especially come off 2 injuries, and then they're going to have to sign him to a huge deal. So, but you got to make that decision, right? You're going to have to make that decision for the draft. I think you should start the contract negotiations with him now, see what he wants. Once you realize that he's going to want way too much, send him packing. And I think you keep Dunlap. I think you have to restructure his deal and keep him. I just think he made too many good plays towards the end of the season, and I think he's a big, tall, lanky guy on the defensive end that we wanted. He kind of reminds me of that, Calais Campbell type, although not quite as good, but like, he's big and strong, and, he's getting older, but I mean, man, extend him 1 more year, lower that cap hit, and see what you got to do. But there's a lot of things that they're going to have to look at. I actually really don't, and I know you're going to hate this. You're going to hate this, Rob. But I really, really think it's going to be fine if they bring back Quentin Dunbar. I think you bring him back. I just think this year was just a really off season for him. Give him a chance to play, get an actual full off season with us, give him a chance. I'm not saying he's going to come cheap. He's not going to be expensive. I think you give him a cheap deal, league minimum, maybe a little bit more, and then you bring back Sherm. And then I think you've got 2 guys that have the opportunity. And if it doesn't work out with Dunbar, I mean, you're not paying him that much. Like, make it incentive laden, you give him a bunch of, guaranteed money if he, reaches certain milestones, and because I think he has the ability, and he was like the number 2 rated, quarterback or cornerback prior to this season on PFF. So I mean, there's reasons why you give this guy another opportunity, but I think some things like that need to happen. I mean, you're going to have to go get guys who may have had a bad year. I mean, there's going to be players who are getting cut who were really expensive, may have been injured. You got to have to take it. You're going to have to roll the dice on some of these guys, because I just, with where you're at salary cap wise, you're not going to have an opportunity to go get, JJ Watt. Like, you're just not. Like, I just don't think it's realistic. But you're going to have to take some chances on some guys who may have some question marks.
So in terms of, I think that you will be able to get a first for Jamal Adams. I just think that in many ways, it's, whenever you sort of go into this topic, Robbie, people sort of then start accusing you of talking out of both sides of your mouth. But on the one hand I do think that this draft is so unusual and strange, and there's so much mystery around everything, and there's so much of a lack of information with the players, that I do think a good team would be willing to give you like a first round pick. I mean, and the teams that I keep coming back to, Cleveland, Miami, teams like, especially Miami, have got 2 first round picks, and one of them's in the top 3. They've got 18, and they've got a pick very early in the second round as well. So you've got a few options there. Whether a pick's 26 or whatever Cleveland is, or 34 or whatever, it's kind of neither here nor there. They're both in the same kind of value range, and that's actually where I think a lot of the strength of this draft is going to be, is having picks in that range, maybe even trading down a little bit, getting a few more picks, and then being able to tap into sort of that. It's that early second round for me, and then throughout the second round, I think you're going to get a lot of value. So that's kind of an area I'd be very comfortable being in. I mean, if it was 2 twos, I'd I'd snap your hand off for that, frankly. But I do think that there will be a one. Now, some people will say, well, why would you want that picks if the team's trading because there's an unknown about the draft? Why would you want to be back in the draft? The simple fact is just because I don't think it's worth. I think in the current state of the Seahawks, where they're at, I think they need young talent and they need to look at other positions. I don't think they need to be spending 18 to 20 million a year on Jamal Adams. I don't think they need to invest that in a safety. And I think that you can still find players in this draft, and their needs align with the strength of this draft, which is for me offensive line and receivers. So I'd be much more comfortable going into this than like a Browns, for example, who what they need are linebackers and safeties. Okay, in Cleveland, I'd be much more preferring to acquire Jamal Adams and that if I was them than I would be, if a team that's trying to get an O-line and a receiver in this draft. That's just the way it is. And I think it comes back to me with, if the Seahawks want to keep Bobby Wagner for 17 million this year and 20 next year, and if you want to have Jamal Adams, Robbie, don't draft Jordan Brooks. Don't draft Marquise Blair. Don't have those two guys. Because if you draft a center last year, we don't have to worry about a center this year. If you draft a cornerback last year, we don't have to talk about bringing Quinton Dunbar back or Richard Sherman. If you draft a running back last year, we don't have to talk about what are they going to do at the running back position. You fill needs. If you have all of your resources pumped into two positions, then how can you possibly fill all of your other needs? It just can't. It's too much at linebacker and safety. So it's time to go. Jordan, here's your shot, pal. You're the middle linebacker of the future. Marquise, we like you. Go and win the strong safety job. And, just go and get somebody else to compete with him. Bloody hell, it's the safety position. It's not the franchise quarterback. Just get somebody. Bring Bradley McDougall back. I don't know. Just get anybody, Ronald McDonald. I don't know. Anybody to go and play that position. And then
Ryan Neal played fairly well.
Ryan Neal. You've got Neal and just whatever. Just go and get another Ryan Neal. I mean, this is the thing, Robbie, is that the Seahawks, we've got to give them credit. They're very good at finding players. Reed, DJ Reed and Neal, and, getting a clever trade for Quandre Diggs and a clever trade for Carlos Dunlap. This is where the Seahawks excel. This is where they do their best work when they're in the opportunistic areas. The Dunbar trade could have been good if it wasn't for the injuries. When they're going for those moves, they're good. It's when they start making these big blockbuster trades that they end up falling down the well and getting stuck. And that's what I want to see. Some calculated trades and some manipulation of the market and getting some good guys in here, and then making a big splash in the two areas that I want to see a big splash at O-line, D-line. That's where I'd like to see them, really going for it. Some other moves that I would make, Robbie, and you can, pass comment on this. This thought popped into mind this week. And it's not something that we've talked about at all and nobody else has talked about, but let's just suggest for a second, right? Cornerback is a very important position in the NFL. But when I look at this cornerback draft class, there's a lot of question marks throughout. There's no sort of surefire prospect. You can make an argument for a Caleb Farley or Patrick Surtain or J.C. Horn or Elijah Molden. There's a few of them, right? But none of them are that, oh my word, this guy's gonna, come in and be Marcus Lattimore. There's none of that. So there may well be a very good market for Shaquille Griffin. And if teams, now the highest paid player in the NFL at cornerback is Jalen Ramsey at 20 million, right? I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that someone like Shaquille Griffin, who's got his own flaws, could be in that 14, 15 million a year kind of range. And that there might actually be 3, 4, 5, 6 teams with some cap space wanting to dabble there, thinking we'll get a good young starter. He's not going to be Richard Sherman. He's not going to be Jalen Ramsey, but a starter nonetheless at a very important position. And if the Seahawks hear over the next few weeks, Robbie, that is the market that Shaquille Griffin is getting, I would franchise tag him and trade him. And I would trade him. Because you might as well get something for him than nothing. So the franchise tag will be about 15 million, I think, which is about kind of what we're talking he might get average per year. So I don't think it's going to put any teams off that they're acquiring a player on that type of a contract. But let's just say that you franchise tag Shaquille Griffin. if he has got a market, and I'm only suggesting to do this if he has a market. I'm not saying just do it and then end up being stuck with him on 15 million, because I don't think that's the right thing to do. But you could always rescind the franchise tag. I mean, that's the other option. If you could even franchise tag him, see his market. If no one's biting, release him. You know, if you can tag him and you can release him, you don't have to until he signs the damn thing. You don't actually have him for 15 million. It's not guaranteed once you give him the tag. But you franchise tag him and you see what's out there. Can you get a third rounder for him? Can you get a late second rounder for him? Is it totally out of the question that a good team in the back end of the second round would be willing to throw a pick his way? The same range that the New England Patriots used on Mohamed Sanu? Is that really out of the question? Or that a team in the early third round who can think, well, we're not going to get a player as good as Shaquille Griffin at the start of round 3, and we're the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we've got millions and millions and millions to spend, and we need a quarterback. We can dress a whole bunch of needs in the first 2 rounds, and then we can trade for Shaquille Griffin at the top of round 3. I don't think that's beyond the realms of possibility. And if we're talking about a Seahawks team that needs to acquire stock, Robbie, this is a way to do it without necessarily maybe needing to trade or cut or restructure or somebody, is to get a pick in round 2 or 3 that we've not even talked about as a possibility. I think there's actually the tag and trade for Shaquille Griffin is at least something that the Seahawks could and should and probably will consider.
Yes, that's super interesting, Robert. As soon as you started talking about it, I was just like, don't say the tag, don't say the tag. And then you said the tag. I mean, but you're right. I mean, it is a possibility. My only fear on that is exactly what you said is you have to make sure he has a market. You have to make sure that someone wants to give up a third, because, you know, they're like, might think, well, I could have had him in free agency and that's when they would have wanted him, but maybe they're not willing to give up a third or a second round pick now that he has been tagged. And, you know, they want an opportunity to negotiate a smaller contract for the first year kind of thing, and then, you know, backload, you know, later with more guarantees. So yeah, I mean, it's a risky game. I like it. We need the pick. So the idea is definitely, you know, intriguing. And so yeah, if you can do that, and if you think his market is going to be hot enough that you can make a trade, then I think it's a no-brainer. But my only fear is that people would just not want to do that, give up a pick and pay the player. I mean, that's my worry with Jamal Adams now. So I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting. I like the thought process, because I mean, that's a way to get picks, and we definitely need them.
And I do think that I think there's absolutely no risk. I mean, as long as you can, you know, you can fit it. You're gonna have to do something to create some space in order to be able to do this. But then, you know, teams seem to do whatever they want in a lot of ways anyway. So I mean, like if the Saints, I mean, how are the Saints going to raise $75 million between now and a month's time? It's actually literally a month until the new league year begins, Robbie. So there's no danger, because you could just tag him, and if after 3 days no one's offering you anything, I mean, look, you could tag him, and then, like, I'm going to assume, Robbie, the Seahawks are going to sign some free agents this year, which means that they won't get a comp pick for Shaquille Griffin, even if he signs a whopping contract. If you sign free agents, then you will not get comp picks. Okay, so let's assume that that you're not going to get a comp pick. Even if you just turn him around for a 5th rounder, you might as well have the 5th. I mean, you've got 4 picks. You might as well just have that. So even if it doesn't, it's not that you have to play hardball and go, you must give us a 2nd round pick, or else no deal, no dice. It's just like, no, you could just say, well, we'll take whatever you're offering. Your 4th rounder will do whatever. And I think someone would offer a day 3 pick for Shaquille Griffin, you know, and as long as he has the market, and they're willing to take on the franchise cap hit in year 1 and use that as the starting point for negotiation. But I actually think, look, if there's no market, if his market was absolutely nothing, you know, nothing at all, right? Just say we're taking the tag off you, you know, after 2 days or 3 days or a week or a month, just go, we're rescinding the tag. You know, until he signs that tag, that 15 million is not guaranteed. And even if he signs it, you could still trade him. So, you know, there's not actually that many risks here. It's simply, can you afford to do it in order to get yourself a pick? And I actually think the more I talk about it, Robbie, the more we speak about it here. If you're listening to this podcast, just remember where you heard that first, because I think that's a way for the Seahawks to get a bit of extra stock there. We'll see what they do. I'm not against Quinton Dunbar coming back on a veteran minimum, as long as it is a veteran minimum. I just think that his injury history, I mean, when it wasn't just like, he's been injured every year practically in his entire career. And eventually you just have to go, this guy's never going to be healthy. And bringing him back, it kind of is a false dawn. What I'd like to see is the main man come back. The main man has been saying today, Robbie, that there's no chance for him going back to San Francisco. So that's the first hurdle cleared. Bring Sherm home is my campaign. And you bring him home and then you draft one of these tall, long, fast quarterbacks in the draft. And you say to Mr. Sherman or Richard, this is your great opportunity to develop the heir apparent, the next Richard Sherman. We want you to do that as part of the agreement of you coming in is to be almost our defensive backs coach. And I can't think of a better person to coach defensive backs. Richard Sherman is an absolute student of the game, and naturally, I'd say almost close to probably like a genius level understanding of the cornerback and defensive back position and of the defensive scheme. And he being able to work with young players, I think it would be a privilege for anybody who is coming into their career to work with Sherm and develop. And I think that would be the best possible opportunity to develop somebody there, Robbie. And I would happily take Sherm, DJ Reed, Big Trey, Flowers, and a rookie as my four. But we'll see. I think the main important thing is freeing up that safety and linebacker resource and pumping that back into the O-line. And that's what I'm going to be interested to see, Robbie. Last year, John Schneider was quoted as saying, we're not big, we never go for the big splash in free agency. And I saw that quote again today in an ESPN article. And it kind of made me sort of crease my face a little bit and cringe a little bit, because I thought, I don't want you to have that mentality this year. I want to see a Corey Linsley or a Brandon Scherf or a Joe Tooney come in. And I want to see, and if you have to raise some money to make that happen, then do it. I don't want to see the next Jamarcus Webb or Luke Jokel or Drew Nowak or BJ Finney or Mike Yapati or we'll just put Phil Haynes at left guard. And do you know what? Damian Lewis is really good at right guard, but let's move him to center because he had a good game filling in there. And let's make Damian Lewis a center now. It's like, no, but you could just see it happening, can't you? Because that's what the Seahawks do. And then, no, don't do that. Just get a good guard and a good center and use a draft pick on one of those. And do you know what? If you can get the O-line sorted, I like this draft for offensive lineman, Robbie. I do. I really do. I do. I write about it. I speak to them. I interview them. I like it. But do you know what? If they could get the O-line sorted and then just go and get Brevin Jordan or Pat Freiermuth or Elijah Moore or, Dwayne Eskridge or whatever, a really kick-ass, tight end or receiver to throw into the mix, who is a pass-catching dynamo, then I'm game for that. Go for that. Or, even better, get the pick so you can do both. There's an idea. There's a thought.
I was going to go back to that Sherm thing real fast. I'm completely on board. Bring Sherm home. Like, let him finish his career. Yeah, he says he wants to play 2 more years. Give him a 2-year deal. Let him finish his time here in Seattle. But I will say, as much as Sherman is a student of the game and is a brilliant human being, having gone to Stanford and all that, he also did claim Thorold Simon to be the next Richard Sherman. And that guy lasted like 5 seasons in the league. He only lasted like 3 seasons with the Hawks and then got cut. So I'm just throwing that out there. Not that I think that means anything, but I just thought it was pretty funny.
I'm blaming Thorold Simon for that, not Richard Sherman. Because in fairness to Thorold Simon, he had everything. And I think the Seahawks were very disappointed that I think they thought he was going to be, the next off the conveyor belt. And it's funny, really, that conveyor belt broke around 2014 and hasn't been fixed since. It's 2021. Where do the years go? And one draft after another without drafting cornerbacks, and they need to fix that for me and get back to what they were. But the great thing is, Robbie, it's February the 17th, and something's going to have to happen soon, because I know teams are kind of in no man's land. The league really needs to find out what's happening with these TV deals so it can confirm what the cap hit is, so teams can start planning and preparing and knowing what they're going to do, because right now they can't act. And as soon as they do act, we're going to see a flurry of moves. And the Seahawks are going to have to be right in there. One, because they've got to win their quarterback round, as we've discussed. And two, if they're going to trade Jamal Adams, then they need to know they're going to trade him. They need to start getting on with that. If they're going to trade Bobby Wagner, they need to get on with that. If they need to restructure some contracts, they need to get on with that. They can't be starting the league year with 2.3. That's not even enough for Poona Ford's deal. So as a second round tender. So this isn't. They're not like, if they had 20 million going into the new league year, they'd be fine. They don't. They have 2.3 million. So something needs to happen, and it's going to happen soon. And we'll be there to talk about it when it does. So thank you for your company again today. Subscribe to the channel. Help us out there. You won't miss a video. Like the video as well, so that it helps give it a little nudge up the board. It's nice to see it up there with all the Russell Wilson videos that pop up from ESPN and Fox, and the last one was right up there as well, and it's nice to see. So let's make that happen as well. Share the video, get onto the forums and the whatevers, the Reddits and the Twitters, and share it and spread it around, and help me and Robbie out and get the message out there about this podcast. We're going to rely on, you're our street team now. If you're watching this, you've got this far, then you're a real fan of the podcast. So you can be our street team, get the message out there and help us make some noise. Right, that's as far as we go today. More analysis on the Seahawks draft blog. Check in soon. I'm interviewing some great draft prospects this week as well. So stay tuned for that. We'll speak again soon.